Hi, I'm Cantor Dreskin, and today we're going to be talking together and studying the holiday of Hannukah. And I'd like to start first with a story. Story is told of a father who had 3 children and wanted to know which one deserved his great fortune after he died. And he really wanted to give his fortune to the child that was the most clever and the most intelligent. So on his large property, there were 3 large barns. And he said to each of his children, "Each of you is given an empty barn. Within a certain amount of time, I'm going to return and I want to see which one of you can fill the barn to its full capacity." And with that, the father disappeared and left the children to themselves. Well, about 3 days later, the father returns, and the first child says, "Father, come look at the barn. Look at what I did." And the child had actually brought in great wagon loads and wagon loads of sand and filled the barn from floor to ceiling with sand. In fact, the only way for the father to determine that the barn was full was not even to go through the door because the sand would come piling out into the yard, but to make a tiny hole in the roof and look and see that indeed there was room for nothing else in the barn. It was all sand. It took days and days. After another period of time had passed, the second child came and said, "Father, you have to come look at the barn." And this child had filled the barn with animals, from floor to rafters, flying things and crawling things, cows and horses and chickens. The barn was not only filled with physical beings, but filled with sound as well. It took a really long time, and there was a lot of cleanup involved when the animals were removed. The third child was just standing and watching all of this. And the father said, "Haven't you filled your barn?" The third child said, "Give me 1 minute." Third child went into the third barn, came out about 30 seconds later and said, "Fine, I'm ready. You can go into the barn." The father walked into the barn, closed the door behind him, came out about 30 seconds later and said to this third child, "You are the one who will receive my fortune." The other siblings wanted to know, what did this child do that was so great and that took so little time? How did this child fill the barn from floor to ceiling in just a moment? They all ran into the barn to see what was in there, and in the middle of the barn, on the floor, was 1 candle. The barn had been filled with darkness, and simply by lighting 1 candle, the barn was now illuminated from floor to ceiling with light. That, of course, is one of the major messages of the holiday of Hannukah. It's about bringing light into the world at the very darkest time of the year. And Judaism shares that value, that aspiration, with many other religions in the world. The light that Judaism asks us to bring in the world is not just the light of a candle or the light of the sun or moon or stars. We learn from the first verses of the book of Genesis that God created light and brought light forth out of darkness on day 1 of creation. But how could that be? The sun and moon and stars weren't created until day 4. So what was that light that God created on the first day? Our teachers tell us that it was the light of awareness, hit or root, that light of awakening that we bring to the world. We are able to kindle a light of curiosity, of wonder, of growth, of evolution. That's the light that we can bring into the world. What kind of light is mine to bring into the world? And is it really going to make a difference? I'll share with you another story. This one also of a very wealthy man. But this time, the man wanted to do something wonderful for the community with all of the money that he had amassed in his lifetime. And he went to the rabbi and said, "I wish to build the community a new synagogue." The Rabbi was thrilled, the community was thrilled, and for months and months and months, the finest architects and builders in the land came to build this new sanctuary and synagogue according to the wealthy man's expectations. And on the day when the synagogue was to open, the entire community came into the room, and they were all oohing and eyeing at the beautiful windows and at the beautiful chairs and at the carpet and at the bima, and oh, the Torah scrolls in the ark, they were all so beautiful. And then they all noticed something very strange. There were lampstands to hold lanterns around the entire periphery of the room, and yet there were no lamps. And there were no lanterns, just the holders. And the community said, it's fine during the daytime, but at night when we come to services, how are we going to see? You've put all the lampstands there, but there's not a single lamp. And the man replied, that was intentional, you see. Each one of us, when we come to synagogue, will bring our own lamp and place it in a lampstand. And the amount of light that is in our synagogue, that is in our sanctuary, in our community, will depend entirely upon who shows up and who brings their light. We will almost always have enough light to see, and yet each of us needs to know that when we don't come and we don't bring our own light, the synagogue will be just a little bit darker because of our absence. Hannukah has this universal theme of bringing light into the world. The difference between Hannukah and so many of our other holidays is that Hannukah is a time when we are the ones to bring the light. Rosh Hashanah commemorates the time when God created the world. Passover, the time when God brought us out of slavery into freedom. Shavuot, the holiday where God gave us the 10 Commandments on top of Mount Sinai. Hannukah is different. It is about bringing light to the world. But God can only bring that light into the world if we bring our light into the world as well.